Welcome back. Joining us this morning is natural health advocate Mary Tocco. She has been in the healthcare field for 29 years. She serves on the ACAB, American Chiropractic Autism Board. Thanks for joining us this morning again.
Pleasure to be back again.
So this morning we're going to talk about how we have traded short-term illnesses for long-term illnesses and how vaccines are not helping with that. So can you explain that a little more?
Well, basically, of course, we began vaccinating back in the 50s for acute illnesses, what we call normal childhood illnesses, measles, mumps, chickenpox, and rubella. And now what it appears is that we have traded acute short-term illnesses for long-term chronic illnesses in children. Statistically, our country has some of the sickest kids in the world. They have chronic illnesses like diabetes, asthma, ADHD. Of course, autism is a huge problem, and there's all different, levels of autism out there on the spectrum. And so what the latest science is showing us is that we've actually traded what were acute illnesses that would last a week or so and were inconvenient, and most times were not life-threatening, for these chronic debilitating illnesses that our children are plagued with in this country.
Now, one of the things I know that children tend to get, and I remember was a chicken pox, and I still got the chicken pox anyway, but I got it much older, and it was much worse. I believe I was 12, and my brother was a couple of years younger. He maybe got 2 or 3 of them, no problem. I was covered in head to toe, even though we still got the shot. So basically, they really don't work.
There's a lot of proof that in highly vaccinated populations, they still have major outbreaks. We know that a lot of these vaccines are live viruses, and so to say that they protect you is an understatement. It really, there is no long-term protection whatsoever. What I believe vaccines are doing and what science is showing us is that they actually cause an immune suppression, or it is causing the body to respond differently to the illness, many times suppressing it instead of allowing a child to experience or express it. And so we are trading, as I said, we might be showing less incidence in some areas, but in other areas we're having major outbreaks of highly vaccinated populations. And one of the points that I'd like to bring up is that even where vaccine rates are lower in different states, there's no greater incidence of childhood illnesses that we're vaccinating for.
Well, let's talk about mass vaccine programs and outbreaks. What is that about?
Well, basically, we have seen statistically across the country that they'll go in and, of course, do a huge vaccine program for different states. And then within a month or two, we have epidemics of those types of illnesses, like measles outbreaks, for example. In my talk, I show charts and graphs of where we've had major outbreaks of measles after vaccine programs, and majority of the children have been fully vaccinated.
Yes.
And oftentimes they try to blame it on the unvaccinated children, which I think is very unfair, because how can you say that if majority of the children who are having the measles outbreaks are the vaccinated population?
Now let's talk a little bit about, I want to throw in a swine flu a little bit, because one time we were discussing that, and they're getting ready to, they're testing the vaccine that they've come up with. Do you think that's the same, that might happen again, where, like you were saying, they gave the children some of these shots, but then they still broke out with it anyway? So you think that will that kind of happen with the swine flu maybe?
Well, the swine flu was a disaster, the last flu vaccine program we had. It caused a lot of severe neurological problems, and they pulled it within a few months. Unfortunately, when they say that they've tested these for safety, they're really not being honest and straightforward with you. Because if that's the fact, then they would have seen the devastation it would have caused and never would have released it. This vaccine is going to be no different. This vaccine is very scary to me. I believe that many, like the WHO, said that this flu is not life-threatening, that it is actually a mild case. And yet there's so much media push on this vaccine. I'm very concerned about it, and I tell parents all the time, you need to really think about whether or not you want to get this vaccine and whether you want your children to. And it really upsets me, too, that they're thinking about going back into the school systems and actually giving these vaccines to your children in school. There was one study I saw where parents said that, yeah, that's okay, it's not too bad, but don't ask me to do that. And I'm thinking, why would parents want their children to get a vaccine that they themselves are not comfortable with?
Yes.
I'm really afraid that we're going to rush to market with this vaccine. It's a combination of the avian flu, the Spanish flu, and the swine flu, supposedly. I believe it's a created virus, a laboratory created virus, and I think it can be very dangerous.
I think it kind of goes along the lines where they try to give you a flu shot and people still wind up having the flu anyway. And then, you know, if you already have a precondition beforehand, the flu just kind of makes it worse. You don't necessarily die from the flu. So some of the things I'm seeing in the stories that are being told is that you're not dying from the swine flu, you're dying from complications of the stuff that you had before.
It's been proven that when Medicare decided to cover the flu vaccine for senior citizens, that very next year, hospitalizations of senior citizens skyrocketed. So, you know, we have to really stop and look at what we're doing. I think what we're doing is we're all looking for a magic pill or a magic injection that's going to save us from some inconvenient illnesses. The bottom line is that's not the key to health care.
And one of the things we were talking about is that most of these illnesses that they're trying to give us vaccines for aren't life-threatening. They're pretty minor things that, you know, you should basically go through, let your child go through and develop their own, you know, antibodies in their body for them.
Actually, there's a lot of proof that when we allow our children to have these infectious illnesses and get through them, and most children do just fine, we are building and strengthening the immune system and preparing it for adulthood. Lots of medical doctors, by the way, are now believing in this. It's pretty much been proven that when you get a lifelong immunity, you're a healthier adult. So it's very true.
Interesting. Now, what about states that have low vaccine rates?
There's, like I said, no greater incidence of these infectious illnesses. Death rate from these illnesses was almost completely gone before they introduced the vaccines. The vaccines were introduced in the late 1950s. All of these infectious killers started to be reduced back in the early 1900s. By the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, they were no longer a life-threatening situation. So there's a lot of statistics out there that people don't get, and that's why I'm so interested in sharing information with parents, because you really can't make an informed vaccine decision unless you have this information.
Yes.
And unfortunately, parents are not being told the truth, and they're just being given a lot of information that's inaccurate.
Well, I think the best way for to get that information to the parent is through your DVD. It's called Are Vaccines Safe? And how can our viewers get this if they want to view more information?
Well, they can go to my website, www.childhoodshots.com. And on that website, I have lots of resources. My favorite links are on there. And you can also order the DVD and a couple other things that I feel are very important pieces of information that parents need to make this decision.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. We appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Mary will be back a little later in the show to talk more about vaccinating your child and why you shouldn't. There's still more to come on Living Low Country Early Edition. We'll be right back.